Hey guys, it's your local Frogman here. Today, we're going to look at how to play White Mage. Not this one, not this one, not this one, this one. White Mage has always been a reliable, supportive, and healer class throughout the Final Fantasy franchise. Whenever they drew the line in the sand between pure healers over there and shield healers over here in 6.0, White Mage didn't change at all. It was already doing what it was supposed to do, just like it's always been doing for the past 35 years. Because of this, White Mage has always been in a comfy couch potato spot, being the only healer you can start out as at level 1. Regen healers, now referred to as pure healers by Square, sometimes referred to as hot healers by the community, typically have bulkier potency heals over their shielding counterpart healers, namely Scholar and Sage. This is because you can't overheal someone for more than their maximum health, so a shield healer will naturally need smaller heals than a pure healer. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of what it means to be a regen healer, and let's get into the math behind it as well. To understand this, we'll also need to understand the concept of the server tick rate. The server tick rate points to many different things in Final Fantasy XIV, but for now, we're just going to focus on healing over time. Whenever you throw a regen on someone, the healing will be compacted into a healing amount that is applied every server tick, or about every 3 seconds, instead of being spread out constantly over the entire duration. This also applies to mana regeneration and can best be displayed on Black Mage after using Blizzard 3. Their mana will regenerate based on the server tick rate, not based on whenever the spell was cast. So, if we know the server tick rate is going to tick every 3 seconds, we can figure out how much each spell is going to actually heal for. So whenever we look at a spell like Regen, it has a duration of 18 seconds with a server tick rate of 3 seconds, so 18 divided by 3 is 6. We know that this spell will tick 6 times with a cure potency of 250, so 250 times 6 is 1500. It will cure for a total of 1500 cure potency over a duration of 18 seconds. But let's be honest. Who gives a shit about math? All we want is more blood for the blood lily. Speaking of lilies, they are going to be a resource used for healing available at level 52 that helps mitigate the usage of mana. An important thing to note here is that Solace, the single target lily, and Rapture, the AoE lily, are both instant casts, which means you can use both of them while moving. This is especially useful during harder content like Alliance raids, Extreme Trials, Savage raids, or even Ultimates, where you need to constantly be moving to safe spots and things like that, because White Mage doesn't have any instant cast damaging abilities like Ruin 2 for Scholar, Toxicon for Sage, and things like that, so you want to constantly be stacking up your blood lily so that it'll be ready for the next window of raid-wide buffs. Raid-wide buffs are every 2 minutes, so if you get a lily every 20 seconds, you want to use at least 3 lilies every 2 minutes. As of 6.1, the blood lily damage has been increased by nearly 40%, so losing out on that much damage during the buff window is a massive damage decrease. So whenever you're going through any kind of harder content and you're just dodging and ducking and dipping and diving and dodging, it's always best to just use a lily. Even if everyone is 100% topped off, you always want to be using your stacks towards the blood lily. Now let's move on to the holy grail of AoE abilities for healers. Holy. Grail. Holy is an AoE you get at level 45 that stuns for 4 seconds after a long cast. Now, obviously you can't stun most bosses in the game, so usually the stun is mostly useful for dungeons and fates and things like that, but the AoE damage is actually not terrible, so if there's an ad phase in the middle of a boss or something like that, it's still pretty good. Due to the way that the stun debuff works, you can rely on the stun from Holy to completely stunlock a pack of enemies through the usage of 3 Holy GCDs, 3 times. They might get in some autos on your tanks, depending on your spell speed, but it's pretty reliable. After that, the diminishing returns from stunning a pack of enemies is way too harsh, and they typically won't be stunned for any amount of time that's worth it, or they'll just be completely immune. Throughout the 3 uses of Holy, the whole pack is stunned for a little less than 10 seconds, so this can actually be used as another layer of mitigation for your tank. Speaking of mitigation, Temperance gives you a pair of glowy angel wings that reduces the damage your party takes while increasing the healing they receive. Wait, those aren't the right wings. Let's see here. Glowy angel wings. Oh wow, this buff's gotten pretty expensive. The big level 90 ability that White Mage got with the release of Endwalker is called Liturgy of the Bell. As you can see from the job action videos Square put out, there are clear inspirations from WoW's Lightwell from Priest. The clear distinctions here are that the Liturgy of the Bell actually only lasts 15 seconds, and the heal AoE for your raid only goes off whenever White Mage takes damage. The best usage of this ability is during a boss fight whenever the boss will do multiple hits for the entire raid in quick succession. So think a stack marker that hits multiple times, think a bleed that hits the entire raid, things like that. The little healing plant thing, whatever that's supposed to be, only has 5 charges, meaning it only heals your raid 5 times. And even if it doesn't do the 5 times in the 15 seconds, don't worry about it, because as of 6.1, they made it where the remaining charges, the leftover charges, will actually heal your entire raid all at once after the 15 seconds will expire. Or, if you want, if you just accidentally place it down, or if you want to proc it at will, you can actually press the bell a second time and it'll use the remaining stacks whenever you want. With all of the fundamentals inside of our beautiful brains, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how to actually play the class. In dungeons, pure healers play a bit differently compared to shield healers. Typically, since shield healers have so many different mitigation tools in their tool belt, they can play with pretty much any tank with the exact same playstyle. Unfortunately, we don't really have that luxury. You gotta keep track of which tank you're playing with and how tanky that particular class is over the other tanks. By the way, I'm not really focusing on the percent mitigation tools each tank has here, or even their respective invulnerabilities, but more so their general kit. For example, a warrior has Bloodwetting on a 25-second cooldown, which can continuously keep them at maximum HP, while, say, Dark Knight doesn't really have anything of the sort. Yeah, sure, they have the Blackest Night, they have Abyssal Drain, things like that, but both abilities combined don't even come close to what the other tanks have in terms of survivability in dungeons. So it's important to know which tools each tank has at their disposal, and watch when they use them, so that you know when you need to heal and when you don't need to heal. So, with those things in mind, going into dungeons, you want to shield and regen your tank using Divine Benison and regen pre-pull, then slap on Aqua Veil to mitigate some damage as they're gathering up all the trash mobs. If your tank is doing a double or a triple pull, you may need to shield a second time and or reapply the regen buff while they're running. And once your tank settles for a spot, you need to look at your tank's health and make a decision. How healthy is the tank? Do I need to use a GC to heal them, or can I go ahead and start spamming Holy? You can answer these questions by seeing how much damage your tank is taking per second. That's sort of the mantra of the healer role to begin with, right? All the way up to Savage raids and Ultimate raids, all the way up to the hardest content in the game. That whenever the next amount of damage, the next mechanic goes off, is my party able to survive that amount of damage or mechanic? Or do I need to use a spell or an ability in order to mitigate whatever is about to happen next? The same thing applies in dungeons, and it mainly only happens to your tank. So a lot of the time, figuring out when you can spam Holy in a pack of trash mobs is just experience of knowing which tanks you can play with, which tanks are experienced for one. So let's say you're playing with a Gunbreaker, you know, he's doing a double pull. Right before he settles, you throw down a Tetragrammaton to top him off. You throw down the bubble, you throw down a regen, he throws a Heart of Conundrum on himself so that he gets the fat heals on himself. Then yeah, he's probably not going anywhere, so you can start holying. Personally, I tend to be pretty liberal in terms of my usage of the bubble, especially at lower levels. You never know whenever a random tank might be pretty new and they don't, not really know what they're doing yet, or their gear might be pretty low level and they take too much damage, or they use mitigation late or anything like that. So I tend to use it a lot, especially since it has a longer cooldown, so you want to use it for the first double pull, and then I'll be back up either for the boss or, whatever the case might be. Now we're going to talk about raids. White Mage is a super safe bet whenever it comes to raiding, especially Prog. It's the healer equivalent of Red Mage for DPS. You can never ever do any wrong picking it. It's got damage, it's got utility, and the potential to solo heal if you ever feel like it because of its raw healing potency numbers. However, if you're not experienced in extended fights with White Mage and when it comes to raiding, it can actually be really, really easy to fuck up your mana. Whenever you're going through a raid, even a Savage raid, the main source of damage you need to worry about is raid wides. Even for tank busters, with a Benison thrown on your tank and then mitigating properly, they typically won't get low enough for you to have to panic heal them, or Benny them, or anything of the sort. Throw a regen on them, have Telegrammaton ready if necessary since it's an off GCD, and be the Glare Mage you were always meant to be, baby. Your go-to combo for healing raid wides is Thin Air, Plenary Indulgence, Medica 2. And like I said earlier, sometimes you won't need Plenary Indulgence because the damage just won't call for it. Sometimes you only need Thin Air, Medica 2, but typically you always want to use Thin Air and Medica 2 just because the mana costs are just too damn high. Whatever you do, just don't rely on Rapture to full heal your party. It's not worth the potency, not worth the time, and it uses up a GCD, so it's not worth the damage loss as well. The only exception to this is using Rapture plus Assize if your cooldowns line up and you're not able to sit there and use up a GCD in order to cast Medica 2. But typically this will only happen whenever a raid wide goes off and you have to immediately move to a safe spot where you can't cast anything, and your cooldowns will line up with Assize plus Rapture. So it's a kind of a niche situation. Typically you always have time between raid wides where you can thin air Medica 2. But if you're not going to use Rapture for healing, and you're trying to find these niche situations to use Rapture or Solace, when the hell are you ever going to use it? That's a good question, viewer. You're going to use Rapture and Solace whenever you're moving. Since they have instant casts, you're going to be using them while you're moving, even if everyone is full HP, except the tank is usually taking auto attack, so use it on the tank, Solace on the tank. Even if nobody needs the healing, even if everyone's full health, as long as you're moving, since White Mage doesn't have any DPS abilities while they're moving, just throw that shit out there. Either Solace or Rapture, doesn't matter, just use one of them while you're moving, because you want to use your Blood Lily every 2 minutes. All the time, every 2 minutes, you want to have your Blood Lily up. Whenever the raid-wide buffs are up, in between mugs, whenever all the raid-wide buffs are up, you want to use Blood Lily, which means that you have to have 3 uses of your lilies every 2 minutes. Now, clearly, I don't advocate for all the white mages out there to spam all 3 of their lilies all at once, you know, try and sparse them out a little bit, but try and use them so that you don't overcap your lilies, because you want to use 3 lilies every 2 minutes. And in the harder fights, especially Savage fights and Ultimate fights, as long as you remember to use a lily every time you're moving, honestly, it's difficult to not use 3 lilies every 2 minutes because you're moving so often. Another thing to keep in mind about raid wides is where your oh shit buttons are. Your oh shit buttons are your bubble and your wings. They both increase your healing output as long as they're in the radius of your wings, which they can't, it's almost impossible for them not to be, and they're inside of your bubble. If your party is not inside your bubble with the increased radius of the bubble, just be sure to yell at your monitor until they stick their pinky toe inside of the bubble. I'm sure it'll work 99% of the time. Assuming Plenary Indulgence is down, you either have 2 options, Medica 2 or Cure 3. Now, Cure 3's range has actually been buffed from 6 yalms to 10, which is almost a double in range, so it's actually a viable option, let's say after a stack marker or something like that. So it has the same radius as the bubble, so if someone is inside of the bubble and you're in the middle of the bubble, you'll most likely hit them. If someone is disrespecting you and they're not inside the bubble, then just use Medica 2. Last but not least is Liturgy of the Bell. It's a pretty simple and easy to use spell. The only thing to remember is that the heal will only go off whenever you, the white mage, takes damage, and the heal actually goes off around the bell itself. It doesn't go off around you like all of your other actions, so make sure the placement of your bell, and actually does matter, so make sure you place it in the middle most of your party. You can actually think of it like Eos or Selene, like Scholar does. You should place it in the middle of the arena, in the middle of your party, either throw it right at your feet if you're going to take like a multi-hit stack marker or a raid-wide bleed or anything like that. Just throw it at your feet, or just generally throw it in the middle of the arena. Anyway guys, that's going to be it for me. Let me know what you thought about my guide on White Mage and what your favorite healer class is. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. I love you all. Take care of yourselves.